Wake Forest back in postseason play for the first time since 2011, taking on a Temple of the American Athletic Conference in the Military Bowl. We bring in Robert Reinhardt from Blogger So Dear to help us set this one up. So, Robert, we talked about it a number of times during the season as this team got off to the great start, pulled off a couple wins that were a bit unexpected. Duke comes to mind, NC State possibly. And you got yourself in a good position before the schedule that was backloaded tagged you with a few losses that were definitely expected there. So you finish at 6-6. So your thoughts about the season to date, minus the bowl game, of course.
Sort of a roller coaster. Yeah, definitely expected that if we were going to make a bowl, we had to get off to a strong start, and we certainly did that, starting off 5-1. And now, I will say I'm very surprised. Had you told me at the beginning of the year that we would have lost to Boston College at home and Army at home, that I would have thought there was a very low chance that we would end up bowl eligible. But when we looked at earlier games on the schedule, when you look at road games at Duke and at Indiana, won both of those games. So that brought us a lot of extra cushion, and obviously we needed that cushion towards the end. But we got a big win over Virginia in early November, thanks to a Jesse Bates pick six that got us bowl eligible. And unfortunately, we couldn't pull off an upset against Louisville or beat Boston College on the last game of the season on Senior Day. But still a successful season so far.
Robert, we talked at length a number of times before the season about the running game, that the running game had to get better for this team to improve in the ACC and to be able to offset the issues at quarterback and in the passing game and some limitations there. If you look at the numbers with Cade Carney in particular, the leading rusher, may be a bit limited there still, but not going to jaw drop anybody in regards to looking at the numbers, because the yards per carry still down, but a significant improvement over people at least had to respect what you could do on the ground.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at somebody like Matt Colburn and Cade Carney, both average about 4.4 yards a carry, which is, for college, maybe that's not the best. You look at some of the better running backs in the country, they'll average more than that. But for us, it was a significant step forward. If you look at S&P Plus ratings, we were 94th overall in rushing, which obviously not where we need to be. But we just 2 years ago, we were dead last in the country in rushing by a mile. So that has to do with definitely improved talent in the backfield, as well as improved offensive line play. So running was definitely a key for us. As you mentioned, passing has continued to be a weakness this year. I didn't think our passing stepped forward to the level that it needed to, but our rushing kept us in a lot of games, and didn't always generate the biggest plays, but helped us generate first downs and control clock. And with our, sort of playing style, that works for us.
The quarterback position in flux most of the season, as we had expected to a certain extent, or at least early in the season. John Wolford with the bulk of the playing time, 55%, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, had some injuries there with Kendall Hinton at one point. So Wolford now has basically had the job. He's been fighting for it, but he's basically had the job now for 3 seasons. Do you see improvement out of him, or is he basically, this is what it's going to be with him, and this is going to be the duration of his career?
I see improvement as a runner. If you look at last year, he sort of did have some ankle injuries. Surprisingly, he runs the same 40 time as Kendall Hinton, though Kendall Hinton is much quicker and more elusive, certainly. But I definitely saw improvement as a runner. Now, as a passer, certainly disappointed. The first few years, it was a little bit difficult to judge him based on, well, does he have receivers who can get open, look at the offensive line play, things like that. But he didn't take the step forward that I would have liked to see him take, and I definitely think this is probably going to be Kendall Hinton's job next year, though we'll see. I mean, Wolford's a fierce competitor, so I don't expect him to go down lightly. But you would definitely like to see a much higher completion percentage, especially if you're not taking the deepest of shots down the field.
And that's what kind of surprises me, Robert, because there was at a time when, he starts as a freshman and in a very difficult conference, playing a lot of top-notch teams and not having the offensive line support or the playmakers or the ground support, really anything in place that he needed, he survived and he played relatively well. But then some pieces were in place. We talked about the young receivers, the young running backs, some guys that really stepped up as freshmen and sophomore and played reasonably well, and his numbers really haven't improved. And Kendall Hinton hit the field, provided this team with a spark, and still only gets the couple attempts per game most games, and that transition never really took place, even though he provides such a different dynamic in the running game and seems to be maybe not as good a passer, but it's not a huge discrepancy.
Yeah, I think Kendall Hinton certainly made significant strides over the last year in terms of catching up as being an equal, or I think he throws a much better deep ball in terms of short to intermediate routes. I'll probably give Wolford a slight advantage, but I think Hinton's advantage in overall athleticism and just the fear that he gives opposing defenses a significant edge. It was unfortunate. Kendall Hinton came in against Duke and really led us to that victory. And then, he started against Delaware, but got hurt, sort of pulled a hamstring, and it ended up being a knee injury. And he never played again for the rest of the season. Now, the only positive is he did not play enough to the point where we can redshirt him. He played as a true freshman last year, so we essentially got a game and a half or so out of him, or 2.5 games out of him for free. But it's unfortunate. Wolford had a really nice performance against Indiana, mostly on the running game, but I think this offense would have been a lot better with Hinton, just based on his ability to improvise and make plays when our offense breaks down. I mean, Wolford can do that to some extent, but if receivers are struggling to get open, that's when you're going to really need a mobile quarterback who can help generate first downs and also cause the corners and the safeties to have some concern, and that can help the receivers get open as well.
Robert Reinhardt joining us from Blogger So Dear to set up Temple and Wake Forest in the Military Bowl. Defensively, Robert, in regards to getting into the opposing backfield and making plays, Dookie, Leafor, and Markel Lee really were the standouts in regards to, especially Lee with 19 tackles for loss. Unfortunately, this is going to be his last game. Leafor comes back next season. Your thoughts about the defensive play and if there was any progression throughout the campaign?
Very, very impressed with the defense. We had a top 30 defense. If you look at the advanced metrics, top 20 defense. If you look at points per game allowed, and that's why our defensive coordinator Mike Elko is headed to Notre Dame for the same role. He's done an excellent job. And again, you look at guys like Duke and Markel. I thought they did an excellent job of getting into the backfield, especially somebody like Duke. He's a guy who can create a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterback without having to send too much additional pressure. So that enables the secondary to make plays. But I thought we did an outstanding job in terms of run defense, thanks to those two. And I also thought Jabari Williams provided some good run support. But yeah, somebody like Markel Lee and Duke, they wreaked havoc on opposing offenses and really threw their game plans off base.
So, Robert, there's always kind of an interesting comparison leading up to a bowl game when it's a different comparison. So you typically have a like-seeded team in a Power 5 league. Like if you finished 5th or 6th, you're going to play a similarly ranked or seeded team in the other conference. But Temple, American Conference, there was a glut of teams that were really good in that conference. They turned out to win the championship. Houston was really good in Navy, and Memphis. Temple really got it done. They lose their coach in Matt Rule, who was really an up-and-comer, and most of us saw that coming at some point because he took like a 2-win program and turned them into a double-digit win team over the last couple of years. So he goes to Baylor. I don't know that that's really an issue with these teams and these players anymore. It's so commonplace for them to lose coordinators and even head coaches that it seems to be a guessing game as to whether that's going to affect the team or not. But this Temple team, they got off to a rough start. They really righted the situation. So you're dealing with not a Power 5, but certainly an equal foe in regards to the roster depth and the talent. Philip Walker, a capable quarterback, Jahad Thomas, like a 1,500-yard back. So this is going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah. Temple is good. I mean, obviously they don't have the name brand of another Power 5 team, and they don't play in a Power 5 conference, obviously, but they're a legitimately very good team. If you look at what they did to a team like South Florida, who was top 25, they beat them by 2 touchdowns. Blew out Navy, who was a top 20 5 team for a decent portion of the season, a team who had beaten Notre Dame. And then even if you look at, only a 7-point loss at Penn State in the third week of the season, we saw what Penn State turned out to be. Now, maybe they hadn't quite turned the corner yet, but I still think that's an impressive showing. And then, Tulane, a common opponent with Wake Forest, who Wake Forest really struggled with offensively, only won that game 7-3 in the opening game of the season. That they go down to New Orleans and beat Tulane 31-0. So make no mistake about it, Wake Forest absolutely has their hands full with Temple. Temple's a reasonable favorite in this one. I think it's probably about 13 points or something like that. So, not an insurmountable deficit to overcome. And I think if you look at just, talent level and recruiting rankings, Wake can play with them, but a very disciplined team and, one Wake's going to have to score enough points to keep up with.
Jahad Thomas, I overshot the rushing performance there. I knew that he ran for about 1,300 yards last year, came back. He got a little bit nicked up. He just was shy of 1,000 yards and still caught 32 passes. And I know that you're going to get experienced quarterback play out of P.J. Walker. He's been around the program and been starting for a long, long time and threw 20 touchdowns. So they have the offensive talent in place, and really they're like playing probably a 5th to 7th place team in a Power 5 conference. So they're really good. They're capable, and it should be a good game. And I will give you a positive note that I checked out some of the Colorado State-Idaho game last night, and Colorado State, a clear 2-touchdown favorite, and they just got taken to the house, to the woodshed by the Vandals last night. So 13 points. Who knows what's going to happen when these teams that never play each other get together on the same field. It will be interesting because the limitations that you have are obviously on offense and creating big plays. And sometimes teams and coaching staffs get together during that 4 to 5 week layoff and are able to create some things that are different and utilize some folks in some different ways. So we'll be interested to see if Wake comes up with anything new.
You hit it exactly. I think in order to win this game, Temple very good on defense, but we're going to have to do a great job in terms of some trick plays to be able to move the ball down the field. I don't think if we just line up and try and run the ball and throw short to intermediate routes, that's going to get the job done. I think we need some wide receiver reverses, some whatever it is. I don't some wildcat, whatever it is. I think to really get the ball going and take some deep shots and scoring some big plays. I think that's going to be our key to success.
Hey, Robert, one last thing to hit you on, then we'll let you go and get you ready for the holidays. But, these bowl games are almost like a transition to the next season. So you can look at it as obviously it counts on this season's record. It's the end of the season, and you want to finish with a winning record. So for a team that's 6-6, I think it's actually kind of a big deal getting to a bowl game for the first time in 5 years, because sometimes some people question the motivation level for the people on the field and maybe even for the fans watching, because, okay, it's an exhibition game, but it's a time to showcase. And for a school like Wake Forest that is rarely going to get the national spotlight, if you're watching college football at that time, if you want to see football, you're watching the Wake Forest Temple game, because there's nothing else in town to watch. My question to you is this transitions from the 15 practices getting ready for 2017. Anybody out there, either offense or defense, that you would like to see break out and have a decent game, because they're going to be counted on a little bit more heavily next fall than they were this past season?
A lot of our receivers. And that's a group I thought was going to break out a little bit more this year. But if you look at somebody like Tabari Hines, he performed better throughout the season as a slot guy. He's small, but he's very athletic, and he can really jump and rise to the ball. And also somebody like Chuck Wade. Then I like to see Cortez Lewis take another step forward. So, I mean, with receivers, it's tough. They're also dependent upon the offensive line blocking. They're dependent upon the quarterback, obviously being able to throw them an accurate ball. But I would really like to see some of our young receivers take steps forward, and when they get the ball, make people miss in space, and really give us a little bit more momentum headed into the offseason, and hopefully build on a much better passing game headed into the 2017 season.
All right. Rarely do we see a Power 5 school, basically a 2-touchdown underdog against a group of 5 school, but that's the setup with Temple at 10-3 and a very impressive resume, taking on Wake Forest in postseason play for the first time in 5 years. All right. Robert Reinhardt from Blogger So Dear on the SB Nation platform for Wake Athletics joining us. Robert, you have a nice Christmas. We appreciate you jumping on.
Hey, thank you. You do the same.